All right, guys and gals, a little bit different video yet again. We are going to do a Q&A video. About an hour and a half ago, I put a post up on both two of my Instagram accounts and on YouTube asking you to ask me questions to answer on camera. I also have some emails I'm going to go through. Sorry, people that email me. I have not gotten any notifications on my email. I've got 5 different email accounts. I forgot to switch over to the Mr. Subaru one and check it, so I've got several that I need to respond to. Just saw it this morning, so sorry about that. Try to get back and answer all of your questions. So, like I said, we got some YouTube questions, we've got some Instagram questions, and we've got some emails. So let's jump into it and see what we got. So, going on to Instagram, what do we got here? Do you prefer the 2.5 or the 2.2 liter? Also, are there any low mile manual? Hang on, can't see the whole thing. How do you make this bigger? Do. Okay, here we go. So, question asked by Ricky YT4242. Do you prefer the 2.5 liter or 2.2 liter? Also, are there any low mile manual legacies in your area? I prefer the 2.2 liter just for its reliability over the 2.5. The 2.2 is gutless. It has no power compared to the 2.5, which doesn't have much power to start with. But with the non-head gasket issues of the 2.2 and just the much less complex design of the 2.2, especially the 22E rather than the 222, which was the Phase 2 EJ22, which more closely resembled a single overhead cam EJ, like a 251, 252, 253. I prefer the 2.2. Like I said, just alone for maintenance issues, lack of maintenance issues. Patches just rolled over right at 290K on factory head gaskets. No issues there. Every other gasket and seal was leaking, but that's what happens when you neglect to do the upkeep on it. As for are there any low mile manual legacies in your area? I don't know off the top of my head. I have not been looking for cars to purchase in the last little bit, as I just bought like 5. Still got to finish the LL Bean Forester to get it to sell, but I've still got that silver 05. I've got an 04 LL Bean, 02, 03 2.5 Outback, and an 05 2.5i Legacy. So I've got plenty on my plate right now. I don't really need to be looking at buying any more. So next question on Instagram comes from Joshua_07. He asks, how many Subarus have you owned, including parts cars? Right now, I have 15 Subarus. That is including parts cars. Grand total, I don't know off the top of my head. If I had to guess, I'd say I've probably owned somewhere in the mid 30 range. So like 33, 34, 35, somewhere in that area. But I'd have to sit down with pen and paper and really think hard to get an accurate number for you. Do It All under /Paul ask, what is a good way to pinpoint the problem when it comes to Subarus overheating? Great question. When Subarus are overheating, first off, you want to make sure that your fans are working, make sure that they're coming on at the correct time. Quick, easy way to check that is to start the car, turn the key on, hit the AC button, see if both fans come on. Both fans should come on and run basically full bore. If they're not coming on, you have a problem in the fan motor, the relays, or fuse. So go through your electronic diagnosis and figure out why your fans aren't working. Past that point, I would look at coolant level, see if you're low on coolant. If you've got a later single overhead cam 2.5, I would check for external coolant leaks between the block and the head, which is prevalent on the later series 2.5s when the head gaskets failed. And on the earlier 2.5, the EJ25D dual overhead cam, they were an internal failure. So check your coolant, check the condition of it, check to see if there's any gunk or buildup under the radiator cap, see if you've got any milkshake under your oil cap. Just the big stuff to make sure it's not a blown head gasket, which you can pass all that and still have a blown head gasket. That's just to check to see if you have a really badly blown head gasket or if it's been going on for a while. Past that point, temperature gun helps to check to see if you've got a thermostat problem. Normally, if you've got a stuck closed thermostat, you can just grab your bottom hose. If it's cold or lukewarm, you have a stuck closed thermostat, or it's not fully opening all the way, or you have a blockage behind it. A lot of times, I don't know if I mentioned it on the video or not, the way I knew that the head gasket was blown in the LL Bean Forester, even though it passed the cylinder leakage test, was the fact that after driving it, it was 90 degrees outside. I drove it for like 45 minutes. Stopped, grabbed the lower radiator hose, and it was just barely warm, almost cool. That thing should be boiling hot. That tells me that the thermostat was not opening, not allowing that hot coolant out of the engine to the radiator. And the cause of that, and the reason why I thought it was a head gasket, normally when they fail, the combustion gases get trapped in the cooling system and they block up right behind the thermostat and make an air bubble against the back of the thermostat. The hot air is not hot enough to open the thermostat. You have to have hot coolant touch it to get it hot enough to actually move that spring and open the thermostat and allow it to flow. So if you've got a cold bottom radiator hose, that's another great sign that you have head gasket issues or thermostat issues. Past that, you go into doing a block test with the chemical to check to see if there are hydrocarbons in the cooling system. You would you want to check to make sure your water pump's not leaking. You want to run the car with the cap off the radiator and make sure you see the coolant circulating. It's kind of hard to tell on a Subaru. Some other cars, it's a lot easier to see the flow of coolant, but make sure that coolant is moving. Make sure you don't have any odd noises coming from the timing cover area where the water pump is. So from there, you would do like a cylinder leakage test after you've done the block test or compression test. But there's several ways that the can cause overheating in the car. You can have radiator issues with a clogged radiator or a clogged heater hose or heater core or blockages in the radiator hoses. You can have a bad radiator cap. Make sure the radiator cap is good. You'd want to take it to somebody to test it unless you have a pressure tester to pressurize the cooling system. Most of those system testers have an adapter to test the cap. You want to make sure that the cap will hold, I believe it's 13, 14 pounds of pressure on the Subaru. If that cap's not holding pressure, then your coolant's going to push out of the cooling system into the overflow and overflow out of the reservoir. The reason that you run the pressure cap on the radiator is just basic science that, the most cars run at 200 to 210 degrees, 215. That's like the optimal level we run them at now. And for you to get that high a temperature without boiling the coolant, the water, you have to pressurize it. As pressure increases, your boiling point lowers. And the exact opposite is true on your air conditioning system. The reason why we put the AC system in a vacuum is because when you pull a vacuum, you lower the point of the boiling point of water. The purpose of the vacuum, one, you want to get all the air out. That happens relatively quickly once hooking up the vacuum pump so that you can put in your refrigerant. But the other thing is moisture. You don't want any moisture in the AC system, so you pull the vacuum, hold it at a vacuum, and that vacuum allows the water that's trapped, the humidity, the moisture that's gotten in there just from opening up a line to boil and pull out of the system. That's nothing to do with overheating, but it's a little thing about the radiator cap. But anyway, so bad radiator cap, blockages in the system, low coolant, bad water pump, bad thermostat, and bad fan motor or wiring. So check all that stuff. There's not 100% way to pinpoint it, but if you go through and check each component, starting at the cheapest and easiest to check and working your way up, you will find most likely what the cause is. So start the radiator cap, thermostat, cheap parts, and work your way up to head gaskets. And you'll be able to figure out along the way, hopefully, where your overheating issue is coming from. Moving on from that was kind of a long-winded question. We have Kevin S. Skeep or Kevin Skeep. Hope I'm pronouncing these right, guys. What is a good price for an EJ22 with 150,000 miles? Not sure if you're asking what price I would pay for an EJ22 engine, or if you're talking about, say, an early Impreza or Legacy that has an EJ22 with that kind of mileage. If we're just talking about an engine with 150,000 miles, the EJ22, if we're talking about an EJ22E, which is the first phase 1 22, 150, 200 bucks maybe tops for a long block, everything, heads, intake, everything attached. If we're talking about a phase 2, 250, 350, somewhere in that range. They're a little bit more expensive than EJ25s because they weren't as prevalent in engines, so they do sometimes pull a little bit more of a premium when you're looking to buy them. If it's an individual, of course, it's going to be less than if you're, say, looking at a junkyard, LKQ, or somewhere like that. Pull apart places, you know, they usually price just, if it's a 4-cylinder engine, it's a flat price, so there's usually not a premium on it being a Subaru engine. Moving on from there, Radu416, we've got, what is your method for checking engine oil? Wait a bit or right after shutoff? You want to wait after, there's a bit of confusion on Subaru dipsticks. There is, put a picture on the screen. You have your low dot, your high dot, and then there's a notch above the high dot. And as I've seen it in the Subaru service manual and owner's manual, the reason that is because the top notch is if you're checking oil with the engine hot, and the bottom full mark is if you're checking cold engine oil in the engine. But to answer your question specifically, let the engine shut off, allow a couple minutes for all that oil to drain back in the pan. You want the oil to drain back down out of the heads and into the oil pan so you can get an accurate reading. If you check it right off a cutoff, there's oil still in the oil pump, in the block, in the heads that hasn't made it back to the pan. You might read low and put half a quart in, say, to top it up. And once everything's drained back in, now you're half a quart overfilled. So wait a little while after shut off, make sure all that oil's had time to work its way back down to the oil pan before you check your level. Like I said, if it's hot and 5 minutes after shutting down after driving, it'll probably be closer to that top notch. And when you are checking it like first thing in the morning on level ground, of course, check on level ground, it'll be or should be right at the full dot above the hash marks on the dipstick. Moving on from there, last question on Instagram from Repairs by Frank. Why is the EJ22 so reliable? Hard to pinpoint exactly why. One, the EJ22 was gutless. It had no power. It didn't have enough power to hurt itself. I know that's not technically a great response because I know people that wring the crap out of them, redline them, just beat the dog out of them, and they still just keep humming right along. The EJ22 was a much simpler engine. It never had the head gasket issues. I'm not exactly sure why, but if I recall correctly, EJ22s used a basic one-layer head gasket like most older vehicles did. They didn't use the coated head gasket like the EJ25s did that failed on them after the coating failed and broke down and chipped off. And they didn't use a multi-layer steel head gasket like the later EJs and now the F-Series and the EZs use. So the reason the head gaskets didn't fail, I'm assuming, is because their head gaskets were different. And like I said, I'm pretty sure they were. I'll put pictures up to show the difference. Just from looking, I'm pretty sure they're. But from there, yeah, the only other difference is really the EJ22 had hydraulic lash adjusters, which I do have a video I filmed on that, doing on patches. I'll get to a later date. So you didn't even have to adjust the valves in the EJ22. They had basically hydraulic lifters per se. It was a lash adjuster, same kind of difference though. where it constantly kept itself in adjustment. You didn't have to go in there and manually adjust them with feeler gauges like you do on the other Subaru four-cylinder EJ engines. Let's see what else we got. That was all from Instagram, unless it's updated. Let's see. Nope, that's all the questions on that. I'll switch over to my Mr. Subaru Instagram account. I do have two. I've got a personal one that I do post a ton of weird, like everything on. A lot of people follow me on because I wasn't using my Mr. Subaru account, but I do use my Mr. Subaru Instagram account now for Subaru posts. So if you want to follow that one for Subaru stuff, fine. If you want to follow my personal one, it's going to be working on this house. I'm standing in my living room floor right now, like literally, like the living room floor is at my belt. So stuff like that, power tools, non-Subaru stuff. There's a couple of Subaru things flown in, but a bunch of random stuff in my life. So what do we got here on Mr. Subaru? We have from CP3 Ite. Are you able to fix turbos with shaft play? Yes, you are. Turbos can be rebuilt. Just like anything else, with shaft play, most likely you get a cartridge. The cartridge usually consists of your inner bearings, your oil feed in and out, the shaft from the turbine and the impeller, and basically you take the housings apart, drop the new brain fart, drop the new cartridge in, throw it all back together and be good. If the shaft play has been prevalent for a while and torn up the impeller or the turbine wheel have gotten so loose from the shaft play that they've started eating into the housing, you'll probably need to replace your housing, especially if it's got burrs coming into contact the impeller or the turbine. So price to rebuild one yourself, you're probably better off just to find a reputable turbo remanufacturer. I know that there is a guy in Charlotte, North Carolina, close to me. God, I can't remember the name of the place. Turbo Express, Turbo Exchange, or something. But it's far easier and cheaper just to go take an old turbo to them. They get the new reman that they rebuild with quality parts, comes with a warranty, and slap that on instead, rather than trying to rebuild the turbo myself. Avoid eBay turbos, guys. I've seen a lot of people get a bunch of crappy, cheap eBay turbos and destroy their engine because it came apart and put metal shavings through the engine, through the oil, or chunks of it went through the engine, through the combustion chambers, like through the intercooler. I mean, just think about it, guys. Invest the money in a quality turbocharger. This is mainly pointed at the EJ255 guys because the turbos are so prevalent to fail on those because of the banjo bullet and the oil starvation issues. But yeah, spend the extra money to get a genuine turbo, new, remanned, or take it to somebody local that's going to give you a warranty instead of buying a cheap Chinese eBay, mystery turbo. So there was that question. Then Madivadala, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that horribly, I know. Biggest maintenance repair on the bean machine. I assume you're talking about my personal 02 LL bean and not the 05 Forester LL bean that I've been repairing, because as you saw, we pulled it down to the short block and completely redid the engine on it. Still got to detail it and pulled the dents on it the other day. I've got a video shot on that. I don't know if it's going to come out or not. It was so hot I was dying. But did that with paintless dent repair kit I've got to a small degree, trying to get that worked out. But clean it up, need to get it for sale, and service the transmission yet, but I've just not had time between working on the house and everything else. So biggest maintenance repair on the bean machine, I'm assuming you're talking about my LL bean. That would most likely be the engine replacement. When I got the bean machine, I bought it, like I said, for $500. I got that car in 2011, I think. It's when I owned my repair shop. It was brain fart. So I think the biggest repair cost on the bean machine would be the engine. because when I got the Outback LL Bean, the engine was shot. The person I bought it from had two big issues. One, they had neglected the rocker cover gasket leak for a very long time. It was disgusting under there. Oil on everything. And ran it low on oil, and they had a rod knock. It was a very slight rod knock, but it still had a rod knock. The main issue and why it showed up at the shop was they split the radiator and continued to drive, overheating the car constantly, stopping, adding water, and continuing to drive. Big no-no. Do not go and drive the car till it starts redlining, stop, and then dump water in it, especially if it's lukewarm or cold water. Think about it, guys. You got a scalding hot 260 degree plus engine and you're dumping cool water in there. That is going to cause that metal to want to shrink up real quick, and you're going to crack the block, crack a head, all kinds of nasty things. If you have an issue and you start to overheat, pull off to the side of the road, shut it down, pop the hood, get as much airflow to it as possible, let it cool down. Once it's halfway cooled down, then you can add fluid, top it back up. Don't try to add anything, take the radiator cap off when it's hot. That's how you get burned. That's how you hurt yourself bad. Steam burns will just tear you up if you take that cap off too quickly, or if you take it off and the coolant blows up. I've seen guys that, actually one of my former Snap-on customers when I was a Snap-on dealer, he had a radiator blow up in his face. He had got third-degree burns on his face. He had to go to the Augusta Burn Center in Georgia, in Georgia. Just nasty stuff, guys. Don't play with that. Overheating, pull over, call somebody, get someone to pick you up, call a tow truck, just let it be. Don't try to do that. Back to the story, getting off track again. Anyway, so they had blown the head gaskets and blown them severely so, and cracked the radiator. So I offered them $500. They wanted to sell the car because they didn't have the money to fix it. Got the car, located a low mileage used engine. When I bought the car, it had 233 on the clock. I got an engine with exactly 100,000 miles less from LKQ. I believe the engine cost me $850 or so. I put new spark plugs in it. I did the rocker cover gaskets, rear main seal, stuff like that before I threw it in. Once I got it running, and I put a new radiator in, of course. It was an aftermarket radiator, which I need to address that. We've got an issue now where I've got a slight leak near the petcock on the radiator, but it's nothing too terrible. But I need to find a radiator fast because that thing could blow apart at any point and leave me stranded, and I don't want that to happen. But yeah, definitely replacing the engine was the most expensive thing. Past that, I put brakes on it because they were horrible. I put tires on it because it had mismatched tires and it was just shaking your teeth out. Put front axle on both sides, wheel bearings on both the front, on both front corners. Dropped the transmission pan, resealed it, serviced the transmission, put a new trans filter in it. 2 air filters I've gone through since I bought the car, serpentine belt, alternator. I've been through like 4 alternators. When I got the engine, it had a junkyard alternator already on it. Easy 30s, like I said, alternators were a big deal with them because they were different than all the other Subarus, and they were more prone to failure because they were higher amperage, and the heat on them was much more so than on the 4-cylinder because more of the engine and the accessories came up around the compressor, plus the fact that the Easies had that engine cover. It just trapped so much heat on the alternator it'd burn it out quicker. So I replaced the first alternator with one from Advance Auto, and I replaced that one like 3 times under warranty because it just kept dying. And the last alternator I put on it, I actually rebuilt myself. As we saw in the SVX alternator rebuild video from years back, it's basically the same thing on the alternator for the SVX and the EZ30D. That just put a kit in it, nice Transpo USA made components, none of that Chinese reman stuff from the parts house, and I haven't had an issue with my alternator since. I rebuilt the alternator back in 2013, I think, so yeah, it's been going strong for a while. Past that, what have I done? Window gussets for air noise. Resealed leaking sunroof. I replaced the seat cover on the driver's side because the bolster was wearing through. I just got a junkyard seat. What else have I done to the old Beam machine? Ball joints, tie rod ends, all the videos that you've seen me shoot basically over the years on the Beam machine, adjusting the AC compressor clutch, the revolution sensor in the AC compressor. Well, that video actually never came to fruition. I've got the clips. I never finished it. I had an issue with the camera. I was thinking about maybe doing a video on it, but it's not a DIY repair. You really need a HVAC. You really need an air conditioned recovery machine to do anything with AC. AC is not really DIY friendly unless your system had a leak and it leaked all out and you're putting new O-rings in it and you've got a vacuum pump and a set of gauges. It's just, not something to do. But yeah, way off topic, but yeah, the most expensive repair to the Beam machine was putting that, not reman, it was a junkyard engine. It was not a reman, so 100,000 miles less on the engine than the car. So the Beam machine just got 290, 500 miles on the clock, so the engine's got 190. And like I said, I don't remember if I said it in a video or if it's an Instagram post, at 300K, I'm pulling the engine and resealing it because I do got some oil seepage on the front and rear timing covers. The upper oil pan is starting to seep a little bit, and yeah, that's about it. It's not terrible, but it's just starting to seep. You can see the oil build up in dirt on the block, but it's no drips or anything. From there, what are we going to check? Let's check YouTube.